Welcome to the Visionary Voices and Insights podcast, where we explore the world of business through the eyes of leaders, founders, and innovators. Whether you're just starting out or scaling up, we've got the insights and the stories to inspire your journey. On this episode of Visionary Voices, we're speaking to Reece, the owner of Creator Concepts. He's been an entrepreneur for over 7 years now and owns an app development company, specializing in no-code tool Bubble. He manages an 8-man team and knows everything when it comes to building, launching, and finding your first client for your web app. So thank you, Reece, for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Awesome. So look, can you share a story or the story of how you discovered Bubble, what it is, and we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, so Bubble is a no-code software development solution. So think of it like a really high-level programming language, but it's a tool where we can build mobile apps, desktop apps, web software, SaaS, and the business really came about quite a few years ago. So I've been in the industry about 7 years, 6 or 7 years now, and I've always been fascinated by the Silicon Valley startup culture. So I've been obsessed with sort of the movies, classic movies like Social Network and that sort of thing. So I started off as a web designer in WordPress. My first sort of startup was building a social network with WordPress. That came about because I really wanted to build something where entrepreneurs could connect with each other, connect with investors, that kind of thing. So that was my first foray into sort of development. Fell in love with doing that. Wanted to go a little bit more in depth on the sort of programming and app development side. So I started to learn more traditional programming languages like Python and JavaScript and bits and pieces for web dev. Found that it was kind of difficult, but also I thought there's got to be a better way of doing it. Did some research and found Bubble. Picked up Bubble, put it down 2 or 3 times before I actually got into it, because there is a bit of a learning curve, especially when you first start. And then sort of third time sort of getting into it, I fell in love with it. I was starting to build really cool apps, interfaces, just some really basic stuff, but I realized very quickly that this was sort of the new way of building things, and that was a few years ago now, and it's just got bigger and bigger as a company and as a community.
Yeah, no, awesome. So I guess before Bubble, before you got into this entrepreneurship space, what were you like then? Like, what were you doing, and like, how did you fall into the entrepreneurship type of route?
Good question. So for me, I've always been very entrepreneurial. So when I was, when I was really young, sort of late teens, I was buying and selling sort of phone cases. So I used to ship wholesale. I used to buy wholesale iPhone cases from China, like hundreds of them. Boxes would turn up and at the front door, and I'd take them all out. I'd sort of package them all up separately, and then I'd sort of resell them on eBay or at school or whatever. So I've always loved the whole buying and selling products. I still do. I suffer very much from sort of shiny object syndrome and kind of feel like I want to get back into e-commerce someday, but for the last few years it's been heavily digital. So yeah, started off with sort of products and wholesale, and then moved more into web design, and then WordPress, and then software and beyond.
No, interesting. I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs had that type of first thing they started. You know, I mean, when they were younger, when they were a kid, they started something. I mean, I remember when I started my first, I guess, business in a way was when I was like 14, 15, and I was a nerd back then, basically. I still am, but I was a nerd back then, building like drones and things like that, and selling drones. Yeah, and so it's like, when I first started doing that, I made like 10 grand when I was 15, like that first year, and I was like, what, this is crazy. Obviously, I didn't hold on to that money because, I wasn't that smart with it, but yeah, it's very interesting to see like that's a common thing. Like a lot of people just have that thing they did when they're younger, and then eventually later on they become, an entrepreneur and actually do it properly.
Yeah, that's mad, because to me, I was super happy with just getting phone cases. But you building drones and stuff like that. Like some people have got some really crazy stories, and some guys, nowadays. So I'm 27, so I've been doing it a little while. But some guys nowadays, 18, 19, and they've built £1 million plus drop shipping businesses. Over COVID, out of nothing, and it's. I think the barrier to entry now for entrepreneurship is so much lower that everyone gets started, but at the same time, it's also a little bit harder because there's so much competition. So although anyone can get started in drop shipping or agencies, digital agencies, obviously SMMA was very big for a good period of time. Because it's that easy, everything gets saturated pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So it's finding those sort of those niches to focus on, and really you can take, I know we're sort of going off course a little bit or pretty early in, but you can take anything and just sort of put a niche focus, put the right positioning and the sort of right marketing around it.
Yeah.
And you can sort of build a pretty good business from it.
Yeah. Especially if you are really good at the thing you do as well, although it is like a saturated, market, for example, agencies, as long as you can get results that are way better than everyone else, like it should help you stand out. But it is definitely difficult when you speak to a client and they're like, oh yeah, we've already spoken to like 10 other agencies. Like, I'm not interested in this, or it's like, oh, I've been burned before, or whatever it is. And you've got to break down like those barriers and things like that, and show them the value that you can actually bring, which is very difficult to do.
It is, especially if you're just starting as well. There's sometimes that question of, have you got any case studies, or who have you worked with before? And sometimes it might be the first client, if you're just getting started. So that can be a tough, a tough sort of initial barrier to overcome. But after that, it kind of gets a bit easier, I think.
Yeah. Because when you start a business, obviously initially it's like you're probably not going to be very good at that thing, unless you've come from like you've worked in it before and then you kind of transition over. But if you're young, chances are you probably haven't. I remember when I started the marketing agency, and the first client I signed was an e-com client, like £300 a month. I was so excited. And then I ended up refunding him all his money after like 2 months because I just didn't get results. And I was like, but it's a learning curve. You've got to go through those motions to learn the thing, and then eventually get better over time. And then, obviously you can get those good results. So I guess, looking over the last 6-7 years of entrepreneurship, what were like the key learning experiences or failures that you had in the direction of creator concepts?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because sometimes I feel like I haven't been moving the needle forwards or sort of moving forwards with things. But I got into journaling very recently and sort of mapping down everything that I'd achieved, everything that I'd failed on, and everything I succeeded on. And actually, I was really happy that I'd done so much, and I've tried so many different, not necessarily different things, but different approaches to the same industry, sort of to marketing, to tech. I'd say the biggest learning for me has been, initially you've got to try loads of different things. It's that saying of throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. But then also up until a point, I think as you find one thing that sticks and that one thing that really works, go all in on that. And the biggest mistake that I've made has been, I haven't done that. I've half-heartedly gone into it, and then I've kept throwing things at the wall. So a few friends of mine have just focused purely on, some have got very lucky and gone straight into something that's worked first time. Others have tried loads of things and it hasn't, and they found something. But when they do, the most successful guys I know have focused on that one thing that they found. Whereas initially, and I've got much better with it now over the last year or two, is I would start something, it started to do well, it would stick. But then I'd think, right, there's something else I can try as well, or a different approach, or let's try and rush into a new avenue of business before I've really focused on that. So focus is a big thing, and I still, as I said, struggle with shiny object syndrome. Like, why can't I just do a little e-commerce on the side? Why can't I do this? And sometimes it works, and e-com's not something I've really got into, but it's just focus, and really stick. And Creative Concepts has been a great example of that, where I've really tried to stick to it. We've got other services which we've introduced recently, but after a period where we've been asked for those services quite a lot, which we can kind of get into. But yeah, I'd say focus and doubling down on one thing. Yeah, no,
I agree. I'm exactly the same. Wanting to do like all these different things and then kind of jumping around. And if you jump around, it's like you don't build up those compounding results, do you? You're just kind of cutting it short and then moving to the next thing.
And you restart.
The cycle, it continues.
You restart. You're back to the beginning. You might make a small name or a small bit of authority in a particular industry. Let's say you start an SMMA, you stick with it for a year, and you build up some cool clients, and you're thinking, right, this is brilliant. Let's shoot over to web dev or web design. And then suddenly you're resetting again. And the clients you had for social don't necessarily transfer to the new agency, and you think they will, but they don't. And you're back to square one. And then suddenly, because you've made that psychological switch, all of a sudden you're committed to the web design. And the SMMA starts to slowly degrade, and you start to lose clients because you've lost focus on that. So if you find something, stick with it, and the grass isn't greener.
It's greener where you water it, isn't it? So
exactly. 100%.
No, interesting. So, I mean, let's talk about SaaS a little bit, because I know you're quite heavily involved in kind of building SaaSes and things like that. So I guess, have you started any softwares, and how are they going?
Yeah. So before we focus on the development side, on the SaaS development and app development, I built a couple of SaaS companies or SaaS businesses in the sort of social media space and the product management space, which I love doing, and I still work on them and still maintain and support them. Now we've got some great customers, and I still evolve those products as part of my ecosystem. But I found that SaaS is so hard to sell unless you've raised a lot of money and you've got investors and that sort of thing. Bootstrapping a SaaS company is very, very difficult because it depends on the industry and it depends on the software. But the design, the building of the software is the easiest part. It's the selling it. It's the finding the customers. Yeah. And really, that's kind of a big takeaway for me and a big learning, is that you shouldn't build something and then try and find a market. You should find a market first, speak to that market as much as possible. And this is kind of one of the oldest sort of business strategies that you should be employing, but you forget to do it, especially if you're like with Bubble and no code. It's so easy to build stuff. So if I come up with an idea, I can build it, and over a weekend or a week, I've suddenly built a micro SaaS tool. Yeah. But actually, that was the fun part. And then going out to sell it, you realize very quickly that you've got the positioning wrong, you've got the market wrong. The market doesn't actually want that, or they want it in a slightly different way. So it's the customer acquisition that's the hardest bit for SaaS. So key learning for me has always been find a market first, figure out what they want, and then build to that. Don't build something just because you can. Otherwise, you're wasting your time.
No, definitely very interesting, because you see it all the time. It's like these companies like, just got backed by Y Combinator. It's like got sold for like, a 5x, 10x multiple, whatever it is. And it sounds very glamorous, like the SaaS game. Yeah. And it's been something as well that like I've always wanted to like build my own SaaS and like my own software company and all those things. But like the reality is, it's like, it's not like that.
It's a super romantic, like super sexy business, SaaS. It's kind of like... trying to think of an example. It's like e-com, like drop shipping. It's super romanticized. Of suddenly you can launch something and you can make loads of money. Yeah, that might happen for a few people if they get. But typically speaking, when that does happen, they've got the targeting right, they've got the audience right, they've done that validation. Yeah, you can't just launch a SaaS and suddenly you're
and hope
doing loads of AR. Yeah, it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work. I mean, I tried it and it just it's really, really difficult.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, it makes sense. So I guess that ties into what your agency does then, is like offering that launchpad experience where it's like, you do the app development and that side of things, build out those systems and softwares, but then you actually help them bring it to market and then launch the thing as well. Yeah,
so that's the big thing for me and for the company, is we're not just a development agency. There's loads of development agencies, traditional ones, no-code ones that specialize in Bubble. There's so many. So our key selling point is the learnings that I've taken from being on the other side of it. So me having launched software companies, apps, bits and pieces like that, the learnings that I've taken is part of what we sell. Yeah. So the initial consultation call, let's say you came to us with an idea for a software, B2B software company. Let's say it was a CRM. Part of what we do isn't just saying, great, where's the spec, let's build it. We try and offer advice and say, well, have you thought about how to solve this problem? Have you thought about who you'll be targeting? Have you thought about how you'll actually acquire these customers? And then we tailor things like the user interface, the onboarding, around that particular strategy or around that audience. We're not just a development shop. We try and harness the learnings and experience that I've had, my team's had, from sort of failing and trying and failing and researching, because we work a lot with, it could be small teams, it could be first-time founders who are of that same mindset that I had, where they think, I'm going to launch something and suddenly everyone's going to rush in and use it.
And you could be like, actually.
And 100%. So
let's take a few steps back. And
that first conversation is, I know you're excited, it's great, but this is how it happens. And then I think that's a really good selling point for us. And then the software is obviously the journey to get them to launch, and then we help with other bits and pieces after that. But it's that initial chat where we've got a real sort of USP.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of like a breath of fresh air within the agency space, because so many agencies, it's like, cool, this is what you want, like, we'll build it, like that's it, cool, here you go, it's up to you now to figure it out. But if you can offer all those other services and actually consult with them and figure out what's the best game plan, then that's just a massive value add. You know, it shows that you actually care about the clients performing and getting those results, right?
Yeah, 100%. Because what we find is, you know, you can just obviously build something, say thank you very much, see you later, but really that's not a great business strategy. If we put in those good foundations and we work with them and then they are successful, they will typically come back and they'll buy, you know, they might buy hours packs from us, development hours, to do new features, to do changes, iterations, whatever it may be, based on customer feedback.
Yeah.
So it's more of a long-term strategy. I mean, obviously we have the initial project, which is great. We have the launch. It usually goes quiet while they're launching and speaking to customers, and then they come back with, like, you were right, this has happened, we haven't had the right sign-ups or whatever, let's change this, let's put this in. So that's really cool to see.
No, awesome. So in terms of, I guess, finding clients within your own agency, because that's quite a big topic within just the agency spaces. Well, how do we find clients, basically? You know, that's the thing.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you do to
question.
What do you do to try and find those types of clients?
It's really difficult. So obviously software is a little bit more high ticket than social media or than other bits and pieces that we can do as well. It's not something where, typically speaking, for creator concepts, the client knows they want an app built. There's not really a discovery phase where we're sort of doing outbound and saying, you know, how's your marketing this year? Are you struggling with marketing? And then you can build sort of a relationship on that. You can't really do that for app development, or at least we haven't found a way to do it.
Yeah.
So typically it can be they've come to us. We've got really good SEO, so we rank first page for, you know, bubble development agencies and other keywords that we want to, which is great. So we have really good SEO. We do obviously Google ads, Google search ads. So we obviously capture some of that audience and that search audience. But also the biggest channel for us has been referrals. So we try and do the best job we can. We ask for a referral. Referrals are really interesting. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts and reading about it, because there's an optimum process, an optimum time to ask for a referral. Time is sort of everything with it. You don't want to ask too quickly, but you also don't want to leave it until the project's delivered and they've sort of left and they're now focusing on marketing and sales. You want to kind of capture that bit where it's almost like over handover, where they're at their sort of most happiest and you know, you've built that really good relationship, and then you ask the question, who else do you know that might be interested in what we do? And it's that timing that matters. You want to capture that when they're thinking, you know, this app's great.
The peak
really
of their
happy.
excitement and everything.
Yeah.
You capture that, and then you'll get those referrals in.
Capture that, and sometimes they'll say, no one. And sometimes they'll have 2 or 3 people that they bring over. So referrals are ideal. Partnerships as well with agencies, web design agencies. Just because lots of clients will go to a web design agency thinking they need a website, but actually what they need is a web app. It could be a marketplace, and they think you can build it with a certain web design tool, and you can't. So we then get referred on for that, and we do like commission structure and that sort of thing for those agencies. So that can work really well, and that almost becomes a bit of a network of agencies who refer us work, and then likewise we can refer out work to them as well in exchange. So a few different strategies. Probably say it comes down to partnerships. It comes down to word of mouth, referrals at the right time, and just your typical advertising.
Yeah, no, definitely interesting, because a lot of agencies I speak to, it's all about, okay, how can we do cold outbound and focus just on that? But I think it depends on what type of offer it is that you're kind of selling? Is it like a demand capture offer, or is it a demand generation offer? Like certain marketing things, you can generate demand for it through cold outreach. Like I can generate you X thousands in 10 days, if whatever, and you can generate that demand. But for web apps and web design as well, it's more about capturing that demand of people who are already looking for that thing.
Yes, and that's the difficult thing, is because when they're in that position in the buying journey, when they've made that decision that they're ready to move ahead, then they're obviously looking at different agencies. They're looking at freelancers. They're looking at Upwork, that sort of thing for people. So capturing that attention and capturing that demand at the right time is very, very difficult. And we're still figuring out the best ways of doing it. And we can that's where we're at the moment, is figuring out how to scale and bring in more apps.
Yeah.
Obviously close more as well, because there is quite a lot of competition. We don't just sell purely on, we'll build the app. We try and provide the support network for them as well, introducing them to really cool partners and other people in my network.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So yeah, capturing it at the right time is very difficult. The offer has to be correct. I'm experimenting with loads of different offers, and I think people can really see through an offer that's just put together for the sake of an offer, especially if you're talking about revenue, and we'll get you to it. It's difficult, I think, because so many people do that.
It can really work. Basically, if like 5 years ago or 10 years ago you were saying this, they'll be like, okay, let's talk about it. But now it's like, we've had this like 10 times today.
I think difference in markets as well.
Yes.
I think with the UK market, people are a little bit more skeptical of things like that naturally. So it's just not an approach we really take. We sell more based on support and the launch support, app development, and the experience, as opposed to revenue, because you can't guarantee revenue. We can't say your app's going to be a success, because nobody knows until it launches, right?
No, for sure. So in terms of like the shifting out from that, from like the to the mindset and growth that you've needed to go through in order to build this business for 7 years, which is a long time as well, because most people quit after like a year, 2 years, because it's a very difficult journey. I guess, what's the most important or the major mindset shifts you've had since starting out on just the entrepreneurship journey overall? Is there any pivotal kind of things that's happened that's kind of shifted your mindset?
There's been a lot. For me, the biggest unlock in the business has been people, and hiring team or contractors and team. Because I started off as a freelancer doing it myself, so I would obviously look after the sales process. I would look after the scoping, the project scoping, and then obviously the development and fulfillment. So I'd be doing the full stack, essentially. That's quite tiring, very non-scalable. You have to do big projects to make the numbers work if you're just doing that solo. And there's also a difficult thing of, where do you get those big clients? Because if they're a big client with a big budget, they'll probably go to a big agency, or they'll go the traditional development route as well. It really just depends. So for me, the recent learnings have been getting fulfillment. So we've got 4 developers, 1 UI designer. The UI design has been fantastic, so I'll get onto that in a second. But people to manage fulfillment, and that means all of my energy and focus can go into finding the clients.
And growing the business.
Working on the business instead of in the business. Yeah, that's the right phrase. Sometimes get it switched. Working on it instead of in it. And you need people around you to do that. You need people who can actually take the project once it's signed, once the client's happy, who can then put the design in, put the development in, do the QA testing, so all the quality assurance and testing and security and all of that stuff. And then that allows me to purely just focus on, how can we get more clients like this, or how can we improve the process with them? And then I have more time to jump on a call and say, have you found everything? Could we have improved here or there? Can you refer anyone to us? And just having that fulfillment set up, that's the biggest thing. And then touched upon the UI designer. So with no code, and Bubble, and really any no code tool, because it's so easy to build things. Once you've mastered the tools and once you've really figured it out, you can iterate very, very quickly. So you can build new features in an hour. That would typically take like maybe a day or two in traditional development stacks. And because it's so quick to iterate, often you would rush ahead and this is sort of a universal thing where you'd rush ahead, you wouldn't really plan it, you wouldn't have a Figma design, you wouldn't have everything planned out, you wouldn't have wireframes, you wouldn't have a prototype. And that can lead to projects going on for way, way too long.
Right.
Because you've opened that door there for the client to say, oh, can we just add this? Can we add this button here? Can we change
Never
this?
ends.
Never ends, never ends. And because I'm generally quite flexible, too flexible, I say, yeah, fine. And we add it on. And then suddenly the project's taken way longer than we should have. The budget has not met what we wanted or what we should have charged for it. So for me, every project we do now, we have a call with myself, UI designer, and the client. So he's fully on board. We scope out all the features. He designs it to spec. He creates a prototype, a clickable prototype in Figma, which is awesome. I didn't realize how cool they were and how good they are. Yeah. So the client can see exactly what it looks like, what it feels like. Any changes there, let's say it's a button over there instead of there, or a different page, is very, very quick to do in Figma, and he just does that. And once we're happy, then it goes to development. It's built to spec, identical to the design. And that sets a subconscious expectation in the client's head and in our head that if you want anything else, more than happy to do it, but it's going to be out of scope. Yeah. I mean, there's flexibility, there could be, if something changes, but generally,
the foundations of it is this is what it is. We've agreed to it.
It closes that door. Yeah, 100%. So, design and strategy first, development, and then you've got a project that instead of it dragging on for months and months, with loads of extra changes from the client or whatever it may be, it's 4 to 6 week delivery or 8 week delivery. We can build a marketplace in 6, 12 weeks, whatever it may be, depending on the size of the marketplace. So that's the biggest learning is people, and then process and strategy.
So when it comes to your team then, because obviously you've got quite a big team now, it's what, 7, 8 people, isn't it? 7 people plus me, so 8 in total. Yeah. So how have you built that team, I guess? Because it's very difficult finding good talent, reliable people. Like, where do you find these people? How do you do that?
Yeah, it's really difficult, and I've tried working with a lot of different developers, and it's like any industry. There's different levels of skill set. Yeah. The best way to find people is through them having a really good initial team member. So team member 1 should always be the sort of right-hand man with things, who sort of gets the business, get what you do, what the business is about. And once you find that person, often they know loads of people in their network that they can refer. And that's kind of happened with us on the team. Is I found one really great person. He brought in or recommended other people from his network that he knew, and then we built it out from there. So I didn't sort of hire externally. I didn't go out to job boards. It was all just a case of a chance meeting from one person, who then had that knock-on effect of knowing other people. Yeah. And it just worked out really well. And there's a bit of luck involved. There's definitely a bit of luck involved. Yeah. I've worked with people that aren't as good, and we've had to let them go. But on reflection, a lot of it also comes down to my learnings of managing people, and, for example, not having that initial design. So they didn't really know what they were meant to be doing, so therefore the work might not have been what we wanted, and there was loads of changes.
You need to give them those clear instructions, so they know how to actually do the thing that you wanna do. Yeah.
So and that's my fault. As the founder of the business, that's always my fault. Is you've got to take that responsibility. So that's why I thought, right, we need a designer to get the first step done, and then the quality of work has just shot up. Yeah. I mean, it was great before, but I didn't realize that how much more, not necessarily the quality of the output, but the quality of the process and the operations. Yeah. The actual fulfillment, where we can cut down the development timeline significantly by just having a proper plan in place that the client is on board with. And then the developers just have to fulfill it to that spec. I mean, that's just like opened my eyes to realizing, I was doing it wrong. I should have just done this to start with, and just saved so much headache.
Easier. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like you don't know what you don't know until you've tried it and say, oh, actually, we should do this. Like I find, like even like a year ago, the things I was doing, I look back now and like, why was I doing that? Like, why was I writing copy that way? Why was I setting up my ads this way, or whatever it's going to be? So it's interesting how that just keeps changing like year on year, which also goes back to, I guess, constantly learning and kind of going through those processes of trying to always become better within the business, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite far in on the entrepreneurship journey, if you want to say that. And still constantly learning stuff, like stuff that we would do 2 years ago. I think that's like so much. There's such a better way of doing it now, as you said, and it's a constant evolution. And I know that in 5-10 years time, I'll look back at things we're doing now and think, if only I just made this change, suddenly we can do stuff in less time, and we can. But that's the whole point of it, right? That's the whole. Exactly. It's a continual journey, I think.
Yeah, you'll never get it right on the first go.
10th go. Yeah, 20, at some point you start to get things right.
So I hope you're enjoying this episode of Visionary Voices. Now, if you're like me and you love to listen to podcasts, but you struggle to remember or even retain the information that's provided to you, then I've actually created a webpage with all of the actionable insights, the lessons, and everything else in between, all timestamped, ready for you to go for this episode. Now, you can get access to this by just connecting with me on LinkedIn, so I can send you over the link to the page. So if you open up LinkedIn and search in my name, Akhil Jannati, which is spelt Aqil space Jannaty. Send me a message, connect with me, and I will send you over that webpage. So I guess what's the future plans then for Creative Concepts? Like, where do you see it going to, especially with all these changes with AI and all these different things popping up? What's your kind of thoughts on that?
It's really, I mean, the AI, OpenAI's systems are really, really great. I mean, we use them in the business for a range of just support sort of services and operations, but also we're getting so many ChatGPT based apps coming in because everyone's got an idea for an AI based this, AI based that, which is really cool. But that comes to that's where we step in and say, actually, this is really cool, but why would they do this as opposed to just using this existing software or this other way? And sometimes that's a case of, a realization for them that actually, you're right, and we'll scrap the idea and we'll do something else. But you built that relationship then, so they might come back 6 months later and say, this is the way we want to do it. So the future for us is, probably implementing AI and stuff more in the business generally, so we can focus more on sales and marketing and fulfillment as opposed to admin. We do a range of sort of support services as well, marketing services. So once we launch an app with the clients, we can offer, we've got an in-house social media manager, so she can look after the socials, put out consistent content, build trust, so they haven't just got an empty Facebook page or whatever it may be. We can also do sort of video marketing as well, where we can do like an explainer video for the app. So once it's launched, a video is really great to say, this is the problem that we solve, here's how we solve it, call to action, start a free trial. Lots of people forget about that. They forget the actual point that people will be signing up for your software or your app is to solve a problem. They think just because it's got a nice UI and features, everyone's going to join, and it's the difference between selling features and selling solution, right? It's that.
I mean, you could make a really nice UI and everything, but if the features aren't there, it's not going to be sticky, and then they're just going to leave anyway. So you need to make sure that back end's actually working as it should.
Exactly, and the stickiness thing is really, really difficult to solve. So for us, that plays into it perfectly, is figuring out how we can help clients figure out what will be sticky and have more of a predictive approach, just improving obviously the experience that we have. And because we do work on a lot of apps and companies in a range of industries, we've got quite a wealth of information and knowledge around that. So for us going forward, I'd like to be able to categorize that more and track it more, and then say, based on this client we did this for, in this industry, like in a similar industry, some of the learnings were X, Y, Z. Obviously not going into too much detail, but more taking a holistic sort of overview as to what we know from a similar industry or market and what the challenges were with that, and then we can kind of guide them a little bit more. So I'd like to build a knowledge base or an internal knowledge bank of that going forward. I'd like to expand the team this year. I'd like to bring in more developers and maybe bring in another designer. I've got to figure out more, I've got to improve customer acquisition strategies as well in order to do that, to warrant the new hires or the new team members. So there's so much on my plate and so much I'm thinking about in terms of how we can do that, what that looks like, what success looks like, what the next goals are from a revenue point of view, how we can increase profit, how we can drive down costs here and there. So yeah, real range of stuff.
Yeah, that's the difficulty as a founder, isn't it? Is that you have all these different things you've got to think about. It's not just like one thing where you're just thinking about, okay, how can we make, I don't know, the service delivery of this specific UI element look better or work better. But it's like you got to think of like the finances, client acquisition, the service delivery, managing the team. Like it's just a whole variety of different things that you need to like constantly be thinking about, which is very difficult to do.
Yeah, and it's I started off on my own freelancing, and then suddenly before I knew it, it's a real business where I've got people that are relying on me to get those clients and bring those people in, and I can't just say I've had enough, I'm going to shut it down, like or try something else, because we've built a really good team around it and it works. We've sort of validated it works, and we've figured out the value proposition and the positioning for it. And as I say, I sort of suddenly just realised, this is actually a real business. We've got a team. The team work together. I've learnt and trained the team to almost manage each other. So there's not really a management figure.
It's work together.
It's really collaborative, because it is such a small team. It's not, we haven't got team management and sort of execs and beyond. It's a case of everyone manages each other, so they check each other's work.
Yeah.
And it's really cool to see. And the other day I was just looking at Slack, and they're all like doing QA with each other and like saying, this needs to happen, or you need to do that, and that's really cool. And I was just sitting there watching it happen, thinking, I've built this. I've built this infrastructure. I've empowered them. I don't like that word for it, but like I've trained them and said, don't come to me with all the problems. Ask someone else in the team, and they'll sort it out. And if they can't sort it out, then come to me and we'll sort it out, and we'll talk about it. But just being able to go to each other and have that confidence to commit to something is, I suppose it's kind of like I don't know what the management style is for it or what you'd call it, but it works for me because it allows me to not be trying to figure out feature issues or bugs or whatever it may be.
Get caught up in all those different things that they'll be coming to you for.
Yeah. And if I do that, then suddenly I'm back in the business and I'm a developer again. Yeah. And I don't want to be doing that. I want to be focusing on
that high level,
on the high level stuff. Yeah. So that's been the most difficult thing to do. But also the most valuable thing is just letting everyone work together. Yeah. And then me being the final point of escalation if needed.
I guess, how was that mindset shift from being an entrepreneur to like building the team up? Because I know for me, I very much like just like doing the work myself sometimes, because it's like sometimes you outsource it to other people, you get some people to work, and it's like, it's not quite how I wanted it. Maybe it's on me for not giving the best instructions, but and then I'll just do it myself and I'll figure it out myself.
Being
like,
how did tools.
Exactly. How did you transition from that? Because that's something like I'm trying to do and struggle with a lot, to be honest.
It's a self-discipline thing. It's being on the, I realize it, and it does happen. It still happens now, where, because obviously I do final line QA, so the developer who's built it will obviously do their testing. Yeah. Then it gets passed to another developer or the team, depending on the size of the project, to do testing, and then they will do a spreadsheet of anything that needs fixing, and they'll mark it off. Once that's all done, it ends up with my hands to test it. And sometimes I do notice things and think, it would be better if we just did this, or that doesn't work quite right. And then I think, right, I can jump back into the tools and get back on the tools and do it all and make those changes. And I know it'll probably take me an hour to do it. But then I try and catch myself and say, you're on the tools again. And I stop, take a step back, and then think, right, what should I be doing versus what I want to do? Because what I want to do isn't necessarily what the right thing to do in this context. I want to just get in there, do it quickly, and then I can ship it off to the client and say, let's have a handover call. Instead, I make a note, write it all down, put it into, we use Trello for our tickets, basically. And I create tickets based on that. And I'd like to get to a point where I don't have to do that. That's the next step in the future, is someone to replace that job for me. I just haven't figured out how I'll get someone with that sort of detailed mindset. But I'll create the ticket. So I'll do a very, very clear, this is the issue. I'll do a Loom video of what the issue is and what my recommendations are. So I recommend a solution to fixing it. so they can sort of learn from it. It's not a case of here's what's wrong, fix it. If it's got to me at that point, it means they probably either didn't know how to fix it, didn't know it was an issue. So that's where I try and do more of the education stuff and make a recommendation on what we should do, and then they will go and implement it. And that just helps going forward. It's less of a transactional fix this. It's more of a
here's the knowledge to do it again in the future. So you're kind of taking the time now to do that training, give them that advice, that feedback, and then in the future that won't be an issue because they've already got that training now.
the why it's wrong, the why this needs to change. So yeah, and really, as I say, self-discipline, just catching yourself saying, I'm not going to do it for the greater good of the company, the longer term. I need to show them how to do it or tell them why it's wrong, and then sit back, let them do it. If it comes to me and it's wrong again, push it back until it gets right. Everyone works really fast, so there's never really a delay as a result. It's more just a case of hassle of me thinking, I've got to write it all out, but it works better than me just fixing it.
Just out of curiosity as well, so you build the web apps for SaaSes, startups, whatever. But do you build like internal tools for these companies as well?
Yeah, we do. We it depends on obviously what the client wants. Some will come to us with a SaaS idea. It could be a mobile app, native app for Apple and Android. We sort of support them getting launched on the app stores as well, because there's a few sort of nuances around that and structuring that for like app store submissions. But we do internal tools. Yeah, it could be like internal project management, internal client management. It could be if they've got a spreadsheet-based system and they want to build it into a tool where their team can use it, so they haven't got hundreds of versions of spreadsheets. It's an internal SaaS, I suppose you could call it, like internal, like a web portal, whatever it may be. So yeah, it doesn't have to be customer-facing at all. It can be internal software. Yeah,
because there's so many businesses now that I see. I go into business and their data's all a mess and like all these different things. And now that we've got AI that you can power like these internal tools with, them deploying these internally in the business will just skyrocket efficiency, make it so much easier. They'll grow so much quicker because they can actually see all the metrics properly and accurately, and then they can kind of make those little changes that they need to within the business to then obviously grow. Yeah,
I think with the data stuff, there's a lot of companies out there that just have data all over the place and spreadsheets, some kind of management software somewhere, and sometimes they just want to integrate or create a portal to just put it all in and view it all, visualize it all. Other times they want to replace their whole stack, and we can do things like that. It really just depends. I mean, there's such a range. We don't have a particular at this point, we don't have a particular focus on what sort of apps we just do and what we turn away. So we try and position a solution. Sometimes we do get apps that we think this is just way beyond our capability and experience in terms of it could be an integration with a really old school enterprise software, and you just think it's going to be a nightmare and it's not good. So we can make a recommendation to an agency that specializes in that kind of thing. So we do that sometimes, but if it's like a brand new software, an app, they want to launch a software company, that's the sort of thing we try and do more of than data driven stuff. But
no, for sure. So kind of, I guess, zooming out into more mindset and these types of things. One question I asked in the last episode was, if you could go back to when you were 18 years old and you could only take back 3 lessons in business philosophy or mindset or anything around basically any type of lesson, what would it be and why?
That's a really good question, a really difficult question. The first one has got to be, it's got to be focus. Focus on one thing and see it through to either to failure or success or natural conclusion, and not skip around and reset progress. So focus. I'd also say confidence in pricing. I think this is a difficult one because sometimes you go into, it could be a call with the client and you know what you want to charge for the project, and then as it comes to the pricing discussion, less so now, but still sometimes you think, oh, they're not going to go for this
Yeah.
pricing, so I'll dramatically drop it, and suddenly I've
Devalued yourself.
devalued
Yeah.
myself immediately from what I originally wanted, or priced up based on what I needed, just to win the business. And when you're first getting started, you know, you can be more flexible because you want to build reputation, you want to build a portfolio. So I'd probably say a learning for that would be just stick with pricing. Don't discount dramatically. If be a little bit flexible, but don't just do it,
You know,
apprehensively. Out of fear. Yeah. For not getting it, and also put. I'd probably say operations and strategy and planning, and don't be too fluid going with the flow with stuff. Have a very focused strategy to talk to. So if I was 18, 19 and I was on a client call, I wouldn't just say, here's what we're going to build, here's how much it's going to be. And we do this now, is we break it down into phases. We've got the UI design phase, the development phase, the testing phase, and the handover and training phase. And then we try and categorize how many hours that's going to take. So they can see, right, this is the price, which, you know, may be high or maybe low to them. I don't know what they're thinking, but this is how we justify it.
Yeah.
And just having that justification to talk to, and they can see how it's all broken down, and they see, the development phase is the biggest phase. That's understandable. The UI phase is so many hours. Just having that would have given me confidence to charge the prices that we needed to, or I wanted to back then. Would have been able to justify it, and the client would have been comfortable with that knowledge of where the prices come from, and I haven't just sort of like made it up. But you've got a thinking behind it, and you always do naturally. But it's a weird thing where you never actually told them.
How have you developed your sales skills over time then? How's that changed?
Yeah, so I really sales. I love sales. It's changed so much. So learnings for me have been really based on. It's been based on trying to educate the client around why they need to think about certain things more than they have. It's about building trust, right? It's about, and again, talking about our value prop is the support around it, the experience. So just talking a lot about that, but also asking questions. Like the main thing is just asking questions, figuring out what they want from the experience, what their goals are, what they're trying to achieve. And then some stuff we might say, we know someone who can help with this part. We can take care of 75%, but we can't do this 25%. So we'll loop you in with so-and-so to do that. Yeah. Again, that builds trust, right? You're not just saying, I can do everything, and then you mess up the 25%. You've built that trust, and you've delivered, you've nailed the 75, and you've been honest and looped in someone to do that 25%. So it's that trust building.
Yeah.
Taking a breath with those calls. Very easy to, let's say when it comes to the pricing conversation, here's the price. And then there's that awkward pause of where they're sort of taking it in. That's a really good opportunity to challenge yourself to not try and fill that gap.
Yeah. Otherwise you start justifying the price, and then it devalues the whole pitch that you just done, because you're trying to justify the price. Yeah.
By that point, you should have already justified yourself.
Exactly.
You wouldn't be in that position if you hadn't already justified yourself from experience, from knowledge, from the overall pitch and presentation. The price is just a gateway to getting the thing done. It shouldn't be something that you have to defend with your life. If you've created enough value and you've built enough trust and they're really happy with everything, unless it's wildly above their expectations, in which case you look at what you can cut back on the scope. You don't need to sort of fill that awkward pause by trying to justify why you should have done that by now. And also just giving them that time to take it in. They could be thinking, crikey, and this happens quite a lot. They could be thinking, cool, that's half of what I thought it would be.
Yeah.
But because there's that pause, sometimes, and I've done this in the past, where I've filled it by saying, well, we can actually do it a little bit cheaper if we take this out. And they haven't even said yes or no yet.
Yeah.
It's that awkward, spooky few seconds. And I've only learned to not do that by listening to podcasts and I say reading, but audiobooks. I can't.
Yeah.
I've tried reading. I like to listen to audiobooks.
Yeah, no, I agree.
But little challenges wherever you can,
Yeah.
whether it's implementing a strategy of something as simple as when you start a call, just setting the agenda, saying purpose of the call is X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And it sounds salesy because obviously it's been made famous by people who do a lot of cold calling and that kind of thing. But actually it really works just to set focus so that they know by the end of the call what you've covered, the project scope, the pricing, here's the next steps.
Yeah.
Setting that agenda, really, really simple. It takes 30 seconds to do it. I also ask questions a lot in terms of trying to make sure they understand.
Reaffirming that it's like, do you understand like what we just kind of went through? So so you can root out, I guess, any objections there and then in a way. If they didn't fully understand something, that's probably going to be an objection later because they didn't have that knowledge. So I guess reaffirming makes a lot of sense.
I'd say if I recorded my sales calls, not really sales calls, more the client call, I'd probably say 25% of the time on that call is me saying, does that make sense? After every single thing, does that make sense? Any questions on that? It's just a sort of a leadership thing. I don't know where I got it from, learned it from. Probably saw it on TV or read something, I don't know. But just them saying, yep, that makes sense, or that you can grasp very quickly from the tone of whether they're being truthful that it makes sense or whether they're not quite sure, or they might just say not quite sure, and that could we repeat it. Back in the day, I would just whiz through the whole thing, get to the end and say happy with that.
Yeah.
And they might be sort of happy with it, but then there might be a few nuances that you haven't fleshed out, and they become a problem later down the line in the project because they thought it was included and it wasn't. They thought it was, you meant this and you didn't. So just taking a breath at each key point, asking if they understand, any questions, move on to the next, and just keeping it really nice and relaxed.
Yeah, especially with these types of projects where it's very much like a bespoke, SaaS project or whatever it's going to be. You need to be so clear on what it is that they actually get with it because there's so many different moving parts with it. I guess just out of curiosity as well, how do you structure like the proposal and like running through that phase of like the call? Because obviously it is a very bespoke thing you're building, similar to like web design in a way, but I guess even more complex because it's, you've got so many different layers of the actual software, how it all works, all these different things. How do you structure that process when you're kind of presenting that to the client?
Yeah, so I'm really, I don't know why, but when we do proposals, okay, so I'll break it up into two parts to the answer. So one, the client will already have a very strong idea of what they're looking for anyway. So we build off that and we make recommendations and we try and scope things out a little bit on the call. It's not like they're coming to us saying we want an app. Well, what does the app do? They already know what they're looking for to an extent. So we build off of that. We obviously make notes and we used to create full proposals, which took ages, super inefficient. Even with ChatGPT and stuff you can probably use nowadays, still super inefficient, and people don't really read them. So what we do now is we do a proposal email where it's essentially quite a long email. Some people will probably say this is a really bad idea. It works for us. Where we break down exactly what the overview, the goal of the project is at the top, a couple of lines of what the goal of the app is. We break down the core feature set. Could be 5 or 6 bullet points of what the core features are. We break down the timeline, 4 to 6 weeks, and we break down the cost, and then we attach, what the 4 phases document of how those hours come about. That's all they need to make a decision, really. They're not fatigued from reading a 10-page long proposal, which they don't fully understand. It's just summarising it, really, really summarising it. It saves us hours. We don't have to do a full proposal.
Yeah.
If there's any questions, they will come back and the client will come back and ask that question. And that has dramatically cut down the sales cycle from weeks of waiting for proposals to be read. Have you read it? Oh, sorry, I haven't had a chance.
Yeah.
And stuff crops up. Yeah. Email works really well. Just summarise it there. Questions come back, and then before you know it, a couple of days later, it's let's go ahead, or actually we decided to hold off, or whatever it may be. You get to that answer very, very quick. Just doing that way. So keeping it simple, fleshing everything out on the call, and then just having a very, very summarised, very accurate. Has to be an accurate email because we don't want scope creep, and we don't want.
Yeah.
So it still has to
be very specific
Be
about
specific.
the goals and what is included, but you keep it very concise in a way.
Yes.
In terms of not building out a full, 10-page proposal and things like that, which can, as you said, take a lot of time. Proposals.
And then suddenly they come back and say, oh, actually, we've gone with someone else, or we've decided to put the project on hold, or the guy who was managing it has left the company, and you've wasted all that time. So yeah, I think that's probably the best structure, and it just works really, really well. And obviously, with the design and the UI and that phase, that's where we can flesh out anything where they thought this was going to happen. They didn't ask about it. They just expected so-and-so feature, and then it's not quite there. And then we can have that conversation, whether it's an add-on or we benefit of the doubt. Okay, fine, we can pop that in. So it just works really well for us. Really, really flexible.
No, amazing. Well, it's been awesome. Thank you for coming on board.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we'll have another episode in the future.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for having me.